Min's New Life, a story by Jay Saunders and illustrations by Meredith Thomas. Min could hear the gentle breathing of her two younger sisters as they slept peacefully beside her. She could hear the swish-swish of car wheels on the wet road outside and the rumble of the tram heading north into the city. Min wished she could go back to sleep, but the cold and her own fear kept her wide awake. She had been in this new country only 3 weeks. It always seemed to be cold and rainy. She couldn't understand the strange language that the teachers and students spoke at her new school. Whenever the teacher talked to her, she kept her head down and stared at a book. She did not understand. Her face was hidden behind her thick black hair. No one spoke to her at playtime. She sat alone. Until a month ago, Min had lived in Vietnam with her 2 sisters and her grandmother, where the country was green, warm and familiar. She remembered her grandmother's soft voice calling, "Get out of bed, sleepyhead." How she missed her grandmother. Her gentle hugs, her happy laughter and her smile. Min could picture so clearly the women of her village working in the rice fields, their colourful clothes bright against the emerald sea. Min's father had left Vietnam 2 years earlier to begin a new life. He had written often telling Min and her sisters of this new country. He had worked very hard until finally he had been able to buy a small grocery shop. He lived above the shop in a busy street in a large city. At last he had saved enough money to pay for Min and her sisters to join him. As the dawn light filled the room, Min slid out of bed. She gazed out the window, afraid of what the new day would bring. When Min started school, her father and sisters had travelled with her each day, but today she would go by herself for the first time. She felt very scared. In the early morning, Min dressed in her school uniform. She took care not to disturb her sleeping sisters as she tiptoed quietly down the narrow wooden stairs to the shop. Her father was already at work, sorting vegetables and polishing different kinds of fruits he sold. "Good morning, Father," Min said. He gave her a gentle smile and asked her if she would be okay today. Min nodded and returned a very tiny but brave smile. "I'll be fine," she said. At 8 o'clock, Min gathered her coat and school backpack. Nervously, she waved goodbye to her father and sisters. The 2 little girls waved back as she stood close to their father's side. Min felt sick with fear. People walked briskly along the pavement, trying to avoid the puddles left by a recent downpour. No one seemed to notice the small figure walking towards the tram stop. Min stopped where her father had told her to wait. She glanced back towards the shop. Her father and sisters stood quietly watching. She could hear the sound of the city tram coming towards her. Min looked up at the front of the tram. Fear gripped her. The tram did not have the 9 shape on the sign above the driver's window. Should she catch the tram or wait for the one with the number 9? She felt confused and so alone. The woman beside Min peered down at her. "Can I help you?" she asked. Min could not understand. Quickly, she turned away as if she hadn't heard. The faded green tram rumbled on and another followed. Min once again peered through the number in the crowd and looked for the number. It was number 9. Her heart skipped a beat as she waited her turn to enter the tram. Some passengers glanced briefly at her as she moved towards the ticket machine. Her father had explained how the machine worked, but now she could not remember how to get the ticket. Should she put the money in first or press the buttons? The words in the machine meant nothing to her. She did not know what to do. The man behind her tapped his foot impatiently as he waited for her to buy her ticket. Just as the first tear began to roll down her cheek, a small hand touched hers. "Oh, hello," said a young girl in Vietnamese. "I'll help you. My name is Lan, and I go to the same school as you. I've seen you in the playground." After Lan helped Min to buy her ticket, they both went towards the back of the tram. Lan explained in Vietnamese that she and her mother had been in this country for 1 year. She could already speak English quite well and could read most of the books the other children in her class were reading. The two girls got off the tram at their stop and walked the rest of the way to school together. Min had made her first friend in her new home.